Okay, guys, so good afternoon or evening in Australia. It is 11 a.m. here in Israel. Sunday is a working day here, just an FYI. If you guys ever want to communicate with us on a Sunday, that's perfectly fine. I'm just going to quickly pre-frame how this presentation is going to be negotiated. First thing being is if I'm going too fast for anyone from Singapore who might be joining us, or anyone from, I think, Malaysia also, please stop me by using the chat box on the far right-hand side. So the first thing in order is why are we putting this thing together for you guys today? And we've done so once before with the claimants that have been joining us from the US and Canada. We've identified a problem in the communication between companies that perform recovery proceedings for clients from abroad, and that is transparency. We find that the best way to communicate with you guys is by providing access to free information as to what your real options are, what the industry is all about, and what to try and avoid when considering any kind of recovery proceedings against anyone who has defrauded you. That being said, I just want to clarify, we are not in any way, shape, or form a recovery agency. We are a peer-to-peer litigation financing platform. And our main mission is to allow equal access to the legal system to anyone who is or can be a plaintiff and does not have the resources to fund and execute a legal action against any of the perpetrators. We do this by connecting defrauded clients who don't want to risk legal fees of any sort or don't have the means to, with private investigators who, private investors who, in exchange for full financing of your legal action against the company, will have an ownership, essentially, a percentage owned by them of the settlement or winnings on the back end, which in some ways is in line with any attorney who would be willing or able to take on your case on contingency, which is what you all want but can't seem to get considering the complexity of your situation. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Can you switch on to the next? Thank you. All right. So presenting today with me is an attorney, and phenomenal attorney, who has represented claimants against binary option companies in the past and in the present, I believe. His name is Tom Lifshitz. He will be here today with me in hopes of, firstly, if there's anything legally that needs to be clarified to you guys, you're more than welcome to ask. If he knows the answer, he will communicate it to you. Everything here is privileged, so you can ask anything. However, if there's something that we can't answer, we will tell you we don't know, and you guys have to be okay with it, okay? So Leah Fellows is another attorney we work with who also is presently representing claimants against binary option companies and fraudulent companies in general. She was with us in the last webinar, and we will be happy to send you all a recording of the webinar held with her as well. I am Inbal Milbaum. I'm the CEO and founder of Bowstring Capital. And I will be here as well as Tom to answer any questions you may have that are not legal questions. I'm not an attorney, but I am very well aware of the situation with these companies, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have during or after the presentation. Moving on to what is binary options really. So in short, binary options allow one to bet on whether or not a value of an asset is going to rise or drop in a specific period of time. Some will call it trading, others nowadays will call it gambling. We think, and I think there was a precedent with regards to what binary options are, whether it's trading or not. It cannot be solicited as trading because you're not buying a commodity and selling it. You're not trading anything for anything. You're betting on whether or not it's a blackjack game, essentially. Another thing you should be aware of, and this is something you didn't know back in the day when you started trading binary options, is that the broker, quote unquote, we now know there were never brokers, but the person on the phone communicating with you, if it's a blackjack game, he is the house, but he doesn't tell you he's the house, and he doesn't tell you that he has all the cards and he knows your cards. You think his incentive is a shared interest with you, but in reality, when you transfer funds over to one of these companies, the money is gone as soon as you do that. And all that's left is to make you think that you're losing the funds legitimately, in the hopes of you walking away at the end of the process, not really realizing or fully realizing that this was fraudulent from start to finish. In other words, these companies found a way to get people to transfer sometimes north of $1 million over to them. And then when they feel they've exhausted you as a client, and this probably sounds familiar to you, they drop you in the form of just losing all of your money. Again, I say losing, you don't lose it to the financial market. You lost it to a platform that is fraudulent from the get-go. And they manipulate it against you or for you, depending what they want. Some of you will say, but I've done this with them and they did send me some money. It's a trick that we're now more aware of than before, that once you're transferred to that person on the phone, the VIP broker of some sort, when they want to earn your trust, what they do is they tell you, give me $10,000, I'll show you a profit, and then you'll give me more, right? And so they show you a profit, they manipulate the platform in your favor. And then when you see a profit, then you trust it, and then you send them more money, right? So it's a little trick they started using back in 2016, thinking that it will get people to trust them more, which in some cases worked out for them pretty well. But again, the second they feel that you no longer have the funds or are not interested to continue, or the worst, want to withdraw, then they go out of their way completely to lose it and make you think that it's been lost legitimately. So that is what binary options the industry did, and I'm going to move on to just a short explanation as to how this was funneled into the companies, the fraudulent companies. What you may have seen was a Facebook ad or a Google ad of some sort offering you to join a trading platform. And then you left your details and someone called you from a department called conversion. And they do what they say. They convert you from a lead to a client. They usually ask for a minimum of $250 US to open an account. And then they send you off to the next department, which is the department that we care about. And I'll explain what that means in just a second. This is the department of the man or woman who was on the phone with you almost every day, telling you a story about how many kids they have, how old they are, their names. I would say a good 99% of the times, the entire storyline is a script to get you to get into a personal relationship with this individual and lure you in. This department was the department responsible for the losses of tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes more. The reason I decided to stress and divide these two departments is because, with respect, you know, a binary options company is the enemy as far as claimants are concerned, but it's important that you guys understand the structure so that you are even just somewhat aware. A lot of these departments were not fully aware of the depth of the fraud. I've spoken with many of Israelis who were at the time employed at these companies. We're talking 25,000 individuals, and not 25,000 individuals defrauded you. It was mainly 3 departments that were in the loop as to where the money was going to. And those 3 departments are the departments that were in the loop of the fraud. These guys over here, the conversion department, may or may not have known how the fraud was executed, or even whether or not it was fraudulent. To them, they got the same story as you guys by these companies. A lot of the times they were told, this is a legitimate trading platform, this is what we do, take $250 and send it off to the next guy. So that's just a little clarification for you guys. Now, the other departments we care about is management. Goes without saying, a CFO has to know where the money is being sent off to. In addition to, in some cases, the back office department that is in charge of the transactions, accounting, and whatnot. The support department, it's very hard to say. I personally have not spoken to many people who have or were employed as a support team in a binary options company, but I think it's fair to say they were not completely in the loop. That's just my assumption, but it's important that you guys know and are able to differentiate the fraudsters from people who were just working at a company, right? Moving on to what we call the end of binary options, question mark. In 2017, the Israeli Knesset came together, the Israeli government, and came to realize that they knew there was a problem. They knew at that point there was a problem, a big one, but it is extremely hard to understand how these companies were operating if you were not a victim and received the phone calls and know how they operate, or within the companies. And so it took them the better part of a decade to fully get an understanding of how this was negotiated and how the fraud was executed. But they came together and they decided to ban all binary option activity from the country. With that being said, binary options still exist in mostly Eastern Europe, but we know that Cyprus is a huge hub nowadays for binary option fraud. They basically took the operations and moved them to locations in Eastern Europe where it's not yet illegal. But the reason I'm mentioning this is because, and this is something that is personal to me, and I'm sure to my colleagues, Israel as a nation is a startup nation filled with innovation in many, many forms, whether socially or high tech. This was very harmful, to say the least, to Israel as a nation in the international community. Provided this was an Israeli fraud, people automatically assumed that anything out of Israel was fraudulent, which is just, it had an astronomical damaging effect to the Israeli economy, even, I would say. It's important to us that you guys know that, as complicated as it may be to an attorney that specializes in the field, you can imagine how difficult it was to put a finger on what was the fraud and how it was committed to an entire nation. And it's important that you guys know that Israel banned it, all binary options activity, and is taking it extremely seriously and extreme measures against them. That being said, I can't assure that binary options is dead and gone. I think they're bigger than ever, and I think they're finding new ways to defraud people, whether it's a different name, CFD stocks, Forex, Bitcoin is a huge danger nowadays because it's very hard to trace, and so forth. Moving on to recovery agencies and what these guys do. So when Israel announced that they're now banning binary option companies from the country, a lot of people saw a business opportunity. And the business opportunity is Israelis who were directly or not directly involved in the industry understand it to the point where they can gather intelligence against the company and use it to leverage the company into a deal. In other words, what these guys wanted to do, which was, by the way, a brilliant business model at the time, is knock on someone's door, tell them, I know where you live, and leverage the intelligence that they have against them, whether it's employees that have agreed to testify against the companies. I'm talking ex-employees from binary option companies, how to trace the assets. They knew the structure of binary options and they wanted to use it against them. And so these guys took on claimants and they decided to not use a legal strategy, but an intel strategy against the companies. And it worked. It worked beautifully once and twice and 3 times, and maybe even more. And a lot of the funds were recovered, millions and millions of dollars, but it's a $60 billion industry. And if we're talking 100 claimants, maybe 3 got their money back using a recovery agency. Now, the recovery agencies at some point said, you know what, we're going to knock on the door, send a letter of demand, try to leverage them into a settlement, and if all goes south, then we will advise the claimants, you guys, to go to litigation proceedings. And I think in the last year and a half, more often than not, the claimants, after having paid the recovery agencies, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars, ended up needing to go ahead and hire an attorney and pay legal fees, and a lot of it. And that put you guys in a problem. The problem is, for some of you, even a recovery process is out of the question in terms of your liquidity. You were defrauded of, for some people, everything they had, including their 401ks, their pensions, and sometimes, even if you wanted to, even if you had a solid case, you can't take it to court. You don't have what we now understand as equal access to the legal system with a problem that is an international problem. And so we've identified this problem, and we are trying to get you guys to court, not just with a recovery agency or some attorney, but with the elite attorneys dealing with this problem. And we want to do this by involving a third party who would pay off your legal expenses in exchange for a percentage. Is it ideal? No, but there is no ideal solution in this case. There are a bunch of really bad options, and we're trying to make this the best out of the bad options. And why is it a bad option? Because in a perfect world, you would be able to sue at least what you were defrauded of and get 100% of it. In reality, we're talking percentages. And if all goes well and it ends up not going to court and being settled, usually a settlement is what, 50%, give or take.
Yeah.
That can be a settlement offer. So 50% out of which an investor will get a chunk is not, by all means, not 100% of what you guys should be getting back. However, our belief is that we should give an option that allows you to get something with minimizing the risk of what you would have to put up front to an attorney. So our belief is that 50% of something is a whole lot more than 100% of nothing. And we want to allow this option to anyone who has a case against binary options or any other case and they can't finance it, to allow an option of a third-party investor to step in. Now, the challenges you guys are facing are as follows. Lack of financing. You might have a great case. You maybe have lost $1 million to a company that is already red flagged and has proven to be a fraudulent company. But for an attorney to execute this, we need evidence, and evidence costs money. Not to mention, this is a multiple jurisdiction problem because the assets can be in Ireland, the perpetrator is in operation in Cyprus, and the owners and whoever can be sued on a civil lawsuit is in Israel. Now, one of the things that an attorney has to do is figure out strategically where to file your lawsuit. This is a lot of work for an attorney. So needless to say, an attorney can't, even if he wants to or she wants to, put this thing together properly without the necessary resources, which is then asked from the clients who sometimes, more often than not, can't finance it. The second problem is who and where to sue. You don't know who you're suing. You know the name of a brand. It can be 1, 2, 3 options. I'm not going to use the real ones. But any of these companies, something binary options, is the name of a brand that is linked to an actual entity. Sometimes they switch so often that you have to trace back 10 or 20 different entities to get to the mothership, to get to where the assets are, to get to the bottom of it. So part of what is needed is to know who you're suing. And if there's no company, the company is in liquidation or it's untraceable, then to identify who the individuals behind the operation were, and so forth and so forth. The third thing is lawyers are not familiar with this field abroad. A lot of financial fraud attorneys abroad specialize in specific niches of fraud. It can be romantic fraud on dating sites and so forth and so car thefts and whatnot. This is a very, very specific type of online financial fraud. And an attorney has to be fully aware of how it was operating, who the individual behind it were, et cetera, et cetera. And that is something that attorneys from abroad who do not specialize specifically in binary option and Forex fraud can't really tackle. So that's another issue. If you were to go to a local attorney, they might say, I don't understand what was fraudulent about it, right? Now, the solutions are as follows. I personally believe that cases should be litigated in court. I don't think there's a way around it. I think there are good business models out there that may or may not be able to assist you. But at the end of the day, you're going to need to make a serious accusation with an attorney, not with someone knocking on people's doors, right? That's my belief. And in order to do so, we have to face all of these problems. And the way we do this is by, like I said, involving a third party. An investor, litigation investor, looks for a percentage of the winnings or settlement in exchange for fully financing a case. And the way this works is we meet our investors and we have your cases, we have your details, we have them sign an NDA so that they can't share any of the information, whether they choose to invest or not. And we work out a probability as to, for example, we have 10 claimants against this company. If you were to invest in this, you would invest in the group. It is not a class action. It is simply 10 people telling the same story against the same company, making it easier for the attorneys in charge as well as easier for the investor in terms of his percentage on the back end. And that's what we offer the investors. Now, how do we present this to an investor? This is a two-step process. The first step is an assessment and evaluation of your case. You claim you have a case against XYZ binary options. That's great. And you claim that you've lost $250,000. But in order to properly present it, put together a presentation for an investor, we need to go through every single file you have and package it in a way that we can sign off on. I have to look at every single transaction you made to the company in question. I have to be able to tell the investor whether or not some of it was wire transfers to Hong Kong, or all of it was done with a credit card processor that is in Israel. This is a very complicated puzzle to put together before we can present it to an investor. So that's the first step, the assessment of evaluation. The second step is to find the right investor. What is the right investor? Some investors only have $20,000 to put towards any kind of case, but they want a group. So if we have enough information against the company and enough claimants against the company, and the attorneys looked at the case and said, this will cost $20,000, then he's the right investor for this particular case, right? Once the case is funded, the investor, then the claimant, and the attorney sign a contract. The contract details the amount in percentage owed to the investor in the event that the negotiation process or the actual lawsuit turns out to your favor. Usually it varies between 20 and 40%, but that's your choice. We have to communicate what the investor is offering in exchange for funding your case to you, and you have to be okay with it, and you can pass it if you think it's too much. That being said, once a match, we call it, is made, there's a negotiating process between all parties, but once that's done, a contract is signed, the investor transfers the retainer to the escrow account of the attorney or attorneys in charge, and you guys are finally on your way to court without risking the little or nothing you have left from this awful thing that happened to you. And that is how we operate. Just a second. Okay, now I'm just gonna pause here for a sec, and I want to make some room for any questions anyone may have. If anyone has any questions, please ask me. Of course, if it's a question that we feel should be answered individually or we can't answer right now, we'll get back to you guys and we will answer them. So I'm just gonna take a quick scan here. Okay, there's a question about whether the link to the webinar can be sent to a client, prospective client for this meeting. Guys, this whole thing is recorded for the sole purpose of, you know, it's a Sunday, a lot of people wanted to participate and they couldn't. So whoever missed it will receive, and signed up for it, will receive a recording of it so that you can rewatch it. If you have anyone from your group of claimants, let's say you know 20 people that are up against the same company you are, by all means, send us an email with some information and we will make sure they receive it, okay? Does anyone have any other questions? Let's see, mgmmarkets.com have taken approximately, what is it, 150,000 or 15,000? 15,000 of me to be used in the chase of FMFX, okay, of which I lost money. They're claiming to help me. Oh, this is a company claiming to help you get your money back? Okay. I'm gonna need a little bit more information from whomever asked this question. We don't use names to protect your identity, of course, but if you could send an email to office@bowstring-capital.com, I'm sure one of the employees here can help you. Okay. Does anyone have any other questions? Okay, if any other questions come to mind, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We truly believe that allowing, at the very least, free access to information will help people who maybe this is not the right choice for them, better understand what to stay away from. We don't think recovery companies are beneficial to you at this point in time. We do think there are other options. If you have a special case, special circumstances, and you're not sure as to whether or not using Bowstring Capital directly is for you, you can always ask us, and we have related entities that may or may not be able to. And that's all we have for today. Tom, is there anything you want to add?
No, thank you for having me here. We're here to solve any question that they have in the webinar.
Okay. All right, guys. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a nice end of the weekend.